You're listening to Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML. Call Don right now, 682-1270.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back to the program. It's 8:38, and I'm pleased to be joined in studio by Jillian Balow. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the program. And I apologize for keeping you waiting. We had a little bit of a mix-up with the schedules, but I'm glad we get a chance to talk to you this morning. You're running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. So first off, why don't we just talk a little bit about your background, then we'll get into all of the nitty-gritty stuff.
Great. Well, hopefully we have lots of folks who have lived in Gillette for a while listening this morning. And my maiden name is McGarvin. I'm a Campbell County graduate, 1988. And so most of the folks out there will probably know me by my maiden name. I am a teacher by profession. I spent 10 years in the classroom teaching in Gillette and in Hewlett. After 10 years, I decided to go into state government leadership, where I spent some time at the Department of Education working on literacy and supervising folks, and then was a policy advisor in the governor's office, working mostly on local issues, local government issues, and working with tribes and being a liaison to a couple of state agencies. From there, I became an administrator at the Department of Family Services, where I am currently. I oversee the economic assistance programs for the state. I have about 200 staff across the state in 28 offices, oversee a budget of about $10 million a month, and really feel like this is a unique skill set to bring to the office of superintendent. There aren't too many folks in education who have a state government leadership background, and not too many folks in state government who have that education expertise.
So you have a little bit of a mix of both, and that's kind of what the Superintendent of Public Instruction position requires. I mean, it's a leadership position, obviously, but it's also a position that has to have a grounding in education as well.
It is. The superintendent is in a unique position to not only influence a lot of different folks, but to really be a collaborator and a coordinator. And that is perhaps the most important role of the superintendent. They need to be able to be an advocate. They are serving by Constitution as the chief advocate for education in Wyoming. And so they have that responsibility to really work with people, local school districts, local school boards, the governor's office, the legislature, and really keeping a pulse on what the diverse communities in Wyoming need in terms of education.
Well, and I'm not really, I've mentioned a million times on the show before that, I came from back east, and I'm not really familiar with what, before I got here, I am now, but the Superintendent of Public Instruction is a position that not a lot of states have, and it's obviously it's an elected position, which is unusual for someone that's the advocate for education in a state. As an elected position, I mean, do you think sometimes there gets to be too much politics in the position?
I think that currently, especially over the last several years, politics has overtaken education in many ways. I don't think that by nature that's because this is an elected position. As an elected official, as one of the top 5 elected officials in the state, the superintendent has a responsibility to serve on a number of boards that deal mostly with economic prosperity in our state. Those are really important positions, really important duties that the superintendent has, but not necessarily political. So I think that the politics is something that has been brought in to the office, not something that's inherently there.
And is that something that you would work to change then?
It absolutely is. I've had a number of conversations with folks across the state who just are saddened by the fact that when they open the paper, they read about politics in education and not about the great things that our local school districts are doing. I think that what's happened at this point is that there's a lot of chaos, a lot of politics in education, and nobody's really quite sure who's in control. And so therefore, I think everyone's taken the reins in some regard. And we need to make sure and identify that the local school boards are in a position to make the most important decisions about education in their communities, and that the superintendent is advocating for those local decisions. So
is there anything in particular that you would do to kind of bring that stability back to the position?
There is. So, in my current role, I've been through a pretty significant reorganization to streamline state government. We call it being more effective and more efficient in state government. I've put a number of contracts out for bid, competitive bid that had been in place for a long time, reorganized some staff, streamlined budgets, at a cost savings of sometimes upwards of $1 million a year with particular contracts and aspects of the job. And so I intend to take that to the office and really help set up a structure at the state office so that local school districts can get their work done.
Now, we'll try to take a call here if you don't mind. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. And News Talk 1270, you're on the air with Jillian Balow.
Yes, ma'am. One question. Common Core. What are you going to do about it?
Oh, you stole my thunder. I was going to ask about that. But hey, thanks a lot.
So Common Core, we certainly have some work to do. I think that one thing that's important to set out is, are we talking about Common Core standards or high standards in Wyoming, or are we talking about this Common Core movement? Because those are two very different things. When we're talking about standards, we do need to have high standards. As you know, sir, at this point, we have adopted the Common Core standards as the Wyoming Content and Performance Standards in Language Arts and Math right now. I consider that a starting point, not an ending point. Once I'm in office, we have 2 years to review and adopt new standards, and I intend to make sure that the voices that have not been heard are heard, and that in 2017, when we have gone through the process, we have some standards that are more Wyoming standards and less federal standards. I have some concerns about this Common Core movement, and when I talk to folks about Common Core, that's typically what they're concerned about, and I share those concerns. There's a lot of federal encroachment with what's happening in education right now. When we talk about over-assessing our students, when we talk about having a national assessment, we have what I call a de facto curriculum that takes away local control. When we talk about data mining on our kids, I think that we don't necessarily know why we're collecting data on kids. We're just collecting it. We need to make sure that we have clear reasons for collecting data, and we know how data is secure and staying within the school building. Sometimes we're talking about issues that have nothing to do with high standards. So that's the long answer, sir. The short answer is that we have some work to do on Common Core. I intend to do that. I understand the issues. I have issues with Common Core, but I do believe in having high standards for our kids.
But you would say that having a standard would be a better idea if they were more in line with Wyoming values?
You know, I will tell you, when I was a teacher, I worked on writing curriculum that aligned to our standards, and this was back in the mid to late 90s, and our standards were pretty much non-existent. They were pretty weak. We need to have a set of standards that enables us to compare students from not only town to town across Wyoming so that we know that if my child is moving from Hewlett, Wyoming to Cody, Wyoming, they're not going to be too far behind when they make that move, or vice versa. But we also need to make sure that our students are ready to succeed on the national and international scale. And the way to do that is by ensuring that we have high standards for our kids. I think that the local school districts have a lot more to do with making standards more robust when they select curriculum and when they select professional development for teachers than the state ought to have in setting the standards.
Now, and you mentioned that you've heard a lot of people that have had concerns about Common Core, the federal Common Core standards. And this is just something that I've noticed, but I've noticed a lot of people have concerns with the standards, not necessarily how they're teaching the math or the reading, but the politicization of the standards. Have you noticed any of that, or have you gotten a lot of feedback that maybe they're politicizing a little bit too much?
I don't know really who they might be, but I definitely think that
the federal standards.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Common Core has become over politicized, especially over the last several months. I think that's as a result of parents becoming increasingly concerned. I think that's a result of kind of seeing what's coming down the road. I'm a Wyoming native, a fifth generation Wyomingite, actually, and this is the best analogy that I can think of, which is maybe one that'll be familiar to lots of folks. But when I was 18 years old, the drinking age changed from 19 to 21. Go figure, it happened when I was 18.
Oh, I'm in the same boat. I'm right there with you.
So I remember in about 1986, our state was saying, no way are we going to change our drinking age because we're getting pressure from the federal government and they can't do anything about it. Well, pretty soon the federal government found a way to do something about it. They took away 5% of our highway funds. We didn't give, which is great. Wyoming is autonomous. A little while later, they took away 5% more of our highway funds, and we were forced into making a decision that we didn't necessarily want to make at that time. So no analogy is perfect, but that's a little bit how I view the Common Core standards. While we can say that anyone can say right now they're grassroots, they were developed by the chief state school officers and the National Governors Association, I think what's coming down the pike is that they're going to become more federalized. There will be strings attached, and I have some major concerns about that. And it's important that we get a superintendent in office who not only understands those issues, but will fight vigilantly against that. I have a record in state government of doing just that. I am one who looks at any federal funds or any funds that we're taking at all, and I look at the strings that are attached. If the strings don't align with the goals that we've already set, we're not going to go after that money.
Well, and since we're talking about standards, the other question I wanted to ask is about the next generation science standards. Where do you stand on those?
Great. So again, I think that the next generation science standards have become a little bit political, especially in Wyoming over the past several months. Again, I view the science standards as any other standards. We need to have high standards for our kids. I am opposed to an off-the-shelf adoption just like Common Core. In Wyoming, we have a wealth of science topics that aren't currently in our standards. I've had some incredible conversations over the past few months with some rather unlikely education partners in the energy industry, ag in the classroom, the agricultural industry, and others. We have an amazing ecosystem. We have some outstanding physical features and unique physical features in Wyoming. Our energy industry and what what role that plays in Wyoming's economy and Wyoming science, and those have a place in Wyoming standards. I think that we're a little bit rushed adopting the next generation science standards. Currently, there's no assessment that's aligned to those. We don't have enough skin in the game right now to say, let's adopt the science standards. We've got science standards. We don't have an assessment. Let's take our time and let's adopt science standards that are the very best. Let's align those science standards with some guidance to the districts that says, this is fair and balanced teaching of science, theory, fact, etc. And these are the Wyoming topics that also ought to be in Wyoming classrooms. And then leave it to the local districts to decide how to make those more robust, stronger, and align their curriculum to that.
Well, and considering that a lot of these kids, especially in high school, when they graduate, a lot of these kids are going to be working in the energy industry. Having something that includes that, I'd imagine, would prepare them that much better, and instead of a standard that just teaches that coal plants are bad and then they go to get a job at the coal plant and they don't know what they're doing.
Absolutely. So even being a Gillette girl, I growing up in Gillette, certainly had a peripheral knowledge of the coal industry, but I think I've become more intrigued by our energy industry as an adult, and I wish that was more prevalent in our classrooms, and I'd like to see that as part of the science standards.
Well, I have a suggestion for you.
I'd love to hear.
I have a suggestion for you. Mandatory field trips to Dry Fork.
I think that would be amazing.
That's it. I think that I wish I'd seen that before I moved out here, because and I grew up I'm not far from coal country. I mean, even my grandfather was a coal miner in West Virginia, but I had no idea the technological advances that have been done.
Yep. We have a pretty neat project that's actually under construction right now in Riverton called the Wind River Job Corps. It'll be the only Job Corps site in Wyoming when it's finished, and they're building a campus in Riverton, and it will be the only one that focuses on the energy industry, and I'm really excited to see that come to fruition. It's about 30% done or completed at this point, and Job Corps students right now are shipped to other states to complete their Job Corps training, and in a couple years' time, we'll have the ability not only to keep those kiddos in Wyoming, but also to instill some excellent workforce training in the energy industry and place them in Wyoming, and really completing that circle that I know lots of us want for our kids. As I mentioned, I'm a fifth-generation Wyomingite. I love Wyoming. I'd like to say that I love it more than anyone else in the whole wide world, but I know there are a lot of folks who are just like me.
Well, and I will say, yeah, you might get an argument on that one, but it's a good argument to have. Okay, let's try one more call. We're almost out of time, but we can take one more call. News Talk 1270, you're on the air.
Yeah, this is Rich Russo.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. I think, that's a good idea to take these kids around these generating plants and coal mines, see what's going. I think the high schools and even the grade schools have fell behind on teaching where this country began, like on our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence. When these classes are offered on the internet, that could help the teachers load, but they need to know what the Constitution was too, and the state constitution.
I couldn't agree more, sir, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Recently, the social studies standards were laid back by the State Board of Education, which incidentally is responsible for adopting standards in the state. It's not the state superintendent, but certainly the state superintendent has a role in that, has influence, and has a responsibility to certainly understand and advocate for that. I was really happy to see the social studies standards laid back for that reason. I think we do need to go back to the founding documents, and we need to make sure that our students understand how this country was and how our state was built.
Well, and that is I think that is something that is kind of lacking, and I want to thank you for the call because that completely slipped my mind to ask about the history side of things. So we only have a couple minutes left. Do you have any upcoming events that you'd like to talk about?
Great. So we'll have a float in the 4th of July parade here in Gillette. We'll also be over spending some time in Cody this weekend, and just out and about visiting with lots of folks. As a Campbell County grad, we have a big reunion coming up at the end of the month. I think it's the 25th and 26th of July, and I'll be back here for that. Really excited to see some classmates and spend some quality time in Gillette. Hopefully some of our teachers will come out and say hello during that event as well.
Well, it's always good to have a Gillette native in here. And again, the website is Jillian, Jillian, the number 4, SUPT. So it's Jillian for Superintendent. .com, Jillian, the number 4, SUPT.com. And do you have an email or anything you want to put out there?
I do. The email is on the website. I'd also like to say that I'm pretty proud of our social media at this point in the campaign. So if you want to follow the campaign, learn more about me as a candidate and where I am and who I'm visiting with, please make sure to find us on Facebook. We also tweet, and the same handle, Jillian, Jillian, the number 4, and then SUPT is our Twitter handle.
And I want to thank you again so much for coming in, Jillian Balow, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again sometime soon.
Don, thanks so much, and I sure would appreciate your support in the primary on August 19th.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to take our top of the hour break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270 KIML.
Listen every Friday at 9 a.m. for the best deals on Steve's store. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.
Crank it up for 90 seconds with a Preacher in the Patch oil patch. That is, it all happened when I had a request to remove some bushes at a friend's house. Bushes, you say? Ha! Being an oil field hand, jerking things out of the ground is our specialty. Yes, that's easy. So I backed up my F350 Power Stroke to the first bush, chained it up to my truck, and took off. Wham! The bush's top broke off completely, but its roots remained. Its anchor held. But do you ever feel like that bush? I have for sure. Today I want to testify of an anchor called Jesus Christ that holds strong. The Bible says we can be greatly encouraged and have hope that